Oh, hi. Didn't see you there. Welcome to Snug Notes. I'm your host, Crystal Ananobi, and today we're going to be talking about The Hours by Michael Cunningham. Okay. The Hours begins with a prologue, in which the suicide of Virginia Woolf is alluded to. Keep this in mind because it will become important later on in our analysis. The Hours by Michael Cunningham follows the story of three women in their lives in a single day. It starts with Virginia Woolf, based off the real author, based in 1920s London, who is writing the book Mrs. Dalloway. Laura Brown, based in 1940s Los Angeles, post-World War II, who is reading the book Mrs. Dalloway. And Clarissa Vaughn, based in 1990s New York City, who is closely mimicking the main character in Mrs. Dalloway, Clarissa Dalloway. The book starts off with Clarissa's storyline, in which she's planning a celebration for her friend Richard, who has just won a prestigious award for his novel. Next, it moves to Laura Brown's life, in which she is stuck in a monotonous role of housewife and provider, and is so bored reading Mrs. Dalloway, wanting to venture out and explore life beyond the home. Lastly, it goes to Virginia Woolf's timeline, in which she contemplates the main character of her novel and how her life will turn out. As the novel continues to go on, readers become more and more aware of each of the three characters' sense of understanding in time and how much they value it or how little. Let's get into our character analysis. The first character we're introduced to in the novel is Virginia Woolf, who is based, like I said before, who is based off the actual author. She has a history of mental illness and is writing a book called Mrs. Dalloway. She many times alludes to the main character in the book committing suicide, which ultimately is foreshadowing her taking her own life, which we talked about in the prologue. Virginia is incredibly sensitive to the world around her and is very observant of everything going on, which is what makes her such a great writer. Next, we move on to Clarissa Vaughn. Unlike the other two characters, Virginia and Laura, Clarissa truly does value her time and her hours, as the title suggests. However, there are times where she does doubt herself and question what her purpose truly is, like every other character. In planning her party for Richard, she realizes that life is not as meaningful as everybody makes it seem. In her older age of 52 years old, she tries to ponder what else she really has to live for. Just like, while Clarissa does value her present life, she has strong feelings of nostalgia for her. Lastly is Laura Brown, based in 1940s Los Angeles, who is the wife of a military man who has just been back from his deployment. She does not like her domestic life, as we can tell many times throughout the play, and she is bored with it, as there's one scene where it's her husband's birthday and she does not even want to come down and say happy birthday to him or make him something to eat. She even contemplates at one point taking her own life and tries to steal moments away to get some peace and quiet and free time to think for herself, since during this time period, women were not allowed to do that. Now on to analysis. The literary device I've chosen to focus on is point of view and the way that Michael Cunningham is able to employ it in his work in The Hours. The first quotation
I've chosen comes from page 33. It reads, "She is Virginia Stephen, pale and tall, startling as a Rembrandt or a Velasquez, appearing 20 years ago at her brother's room in Cambridge in a white dress, and she is Virginia Woolf, standing before him right now. She has aged dramatically, just this year, as if a layer of air has leaked out from under her skin. She's grown craggy and worn. She's begun to look as if she's carved from very porous gray white marble. She is still regal, still exquisitely formed, still possesses her formidable lunar radiance, but she is no longer beautiful."
The next quote I've chosen comes from page 50, and this is in the perspective of Clarissa Vaughn.
It reads, "These two girls standing beside Clarissa, 20 if not younger, defiantly hefty, slouching into each other, laden with bright-colored bags from discount stores. These two girls will grow to middle and then old age, either wither or bloat. The cemeteries in which they're buried will fall eventually into ruin, the grass grown wild, browsed at night by dogs, and when all that remains of these girls is a few silver fillings lost underground, the woman in the trailer will still be known."
This ties into the theme of time, specifically in the forward sense, and the idea of aging mortality. Michael Cunningham uses these three storylines to evaluate the significance of time, or the hours we are given to live. Virginia, Clarissa, and Laura all look at suicide as a way to rid themselves of the world's problems, and by uniquely shifting perspective and changing the point of views between the three women, readers get a better gauge of the hardships each woman must go through and how it affects their value, in turn making them unappreciative of the time or the hours spent living, each one counting down to their inevitable death. Now time for my reaction. Some questions this book made me ask was, why incorporate Virginia Woolf as a character in the novel and allude to her work Mrs. Dalloway when Michael Cunningham wrote this in the 1990s and Virginia Woolf killed herself in 1943, so her headspace and her mindset wasn't known when she was writing it, so why incorporate her into the book? To me, this book is really about the value we place on our lives, as it is seen each of the three women contemplate suicide, and that is because of the things they're surrounded by in their environment. Clarissa is surrounded by her best friend Richard, who has AIDS, watching him die. Laura is in the post-World War II era where men have come home from war and some have not, because obviously they have died. It's a traumatic experience. And Virginia Woolf is suffering from mental illness and does not really know what's going on in her deteriorating mental state, and she feels her only way out is death. So it really questions the value we place on the time or the hours we have left and their significance. What can make this book hard or confusing for a reader is that it is not a sequel, but like kind of bases off Virginia Woolf's actual novel, Mrs. Dalloway. So I would recommend reading that first before you read the hours. And on the Snug Notes meter, I give this book a 7.5, only because personally I didn't read Mrs. Dalloway before I read this book, so it was a little hard to understand at first, but overall it was a good book, and I feel like the theme and main message was something that a lot of people can relate to.